am I receiving feedback to improve how I communicate what I feel like God is saying? Or am I wanting feedback to reassure insecurity within myself?
Yeah.
About whether I can hear God properly, whether I do hear God, whether God is working in and through me.
Welcome to the Prophecy Project, an accessible prophecy podcast. In each episode, we explore some aspect of prophecy, from theology and practical aspects of hearing God, through to leading healthy prophetic cultures and exploring how prophecy can enhance local mission. Accessible Prophecy is a global ministry that helps individuals grow in the prophetic and helps local churches grow healthy and mature prophetic cultures. And now, here are your hosts, Andrew Hill and Christine Wanstall.
Hey Andrew, welcome everyone to the Prophecy Project, an accessible prophecy podcast. Oh, I almost got there.
You almost did, but hey, we know what it is. It's an accessible prophecy podcast. But I didn't have to say.
We just had this conversation 30 seconds ago, who's starting the podcast, and Andrew says, oh, you do it because you'll get your head around the title at 8 a.m, which is when we're doing this recording. I didn't get my head around it, and you did. See?
Yeah, but I didn't have to say the 3 Ps before accessible prophecy podcast. I think I sort of got off quite lightly, really. Anyway, how are you, Chris? Are you doing well?
I'm very well. There's 2 weeks before Christmas, and it's 8 a.m. in the morning, which is when we found time to do the recording. So welcome everyone to probably what may well be a less filtered podcast because of the season and time that we're doing it. It's awesome.
That's right. It is awesome. It's an awesome time of year. Love this time of year. In fact, I had someone yesterday who I bumped into who said, oh, I first listened to your podcast just on a year ago. I listened to the Christmas one last year when you were talking about, this is one of the most prophetic times of, the most significant prophetic times of the year. And I went, oh, wow, yeah, we did talk about that last year. I think that was a good podcast. I enjoyed it anyway. And so did other people, which is good.
Did it remind you of some good wisdom for us to approach Christmas with again?
Yes, but also I told you it's going to be interesting. I did, but I was interested even just to be reminded. I've been reading through a little bit of Matthew and was reading through the genealogy of Jesus yesterday, and just again amazed at how God uses really ordinary people with, lives that are tumultuous and, full of not necessarily following him the way that maybe God would want them to follow him. If you read through the genealogy, you're really surprised at, oh my goodness, that person, oh, that person, oh, that person, oh, wow, crazy things have gone on in their lives. They're not all perfect people, and nor are we, but God uses us, and he used them. And so what a great way to, approach Christmas, realizing again that the King of Kings came from a line of people who were imperfect but used by God. It's a great way to start, I think.
It's an awesome way to engage with it, isn't it? And just that recognition of how we're placed in God's family and the place that we have as imperfect people that God uses in whatever way he wants to. One of the things that struck me this season, David did a fantastic sermon a couple of weeks ago. So it would have been the first week of December. If anyone wants to listen, hop on the Encounter Baptist website.
I was going to say at Encounter Baptist Church, yeah.
At Encounter Baptist Church. But he talked about that we don't look forward to Christmas because it was a historic event, and actually, it's something that we remember from the past, but what we do actually look forward to is the second coming of Jesus and putting that within the context of the Christmas story. And it was awesome just to be reminded around the active story that we're part of. That it's not just an event that happened historically, but we're captured within this Christmas element around the future. What does it look like uh, looking forward to the second coming of
Yeah.
Jesus. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, jump on and listen. It was a fantastic, fantastic reflection.
That's good.
So,
Good.
Andrew, what's God been doing for you in recent times?
Well, probably since the last time we recorded a podcast, I've shifted roles. So moved from working at the Baptist Union of Victoria now to working in a church called New Community in Ringwood. Great church.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Great church, great leadership. So I'm an associate pastor there, one of the associates, and I'm really enjoying it, working with this amazing team of people who continue to seek God and continue to, you know, exercise the prophetic in different ways. And so it's a really, look, I'm 4 weeks in and loving it, loving the people, loving getting to know everybody. So it's really, really wonderful. It's a good lead up to Christmas, actually, getting to know different people and being part of a new community at New Community. So it's good. It's really good.
Awesome. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that's really good. What about you? What's been happening with you?
Well, I actually, like, I had a pretty significant event happen a couple of weeks ago. It wasn't like an anniversary or a wedding or anything like that, but it was actually God capturing my attention through two events happening on the same day. And I actually wondered this morning whether you would help me unpack a kairos around what happened.
Sure. This will be interesting. This will be fun. I like this bit. Yeah, let's
Well,
do this, Chris.
yeah, you're finding it interesting because you're not the one unpacking. You're the one unpacking it for me.
I did that a
I'm the one
while
that had
ago,
the
you know.
kairos.
Hey, leaders, what did you say that day when we did that Hearing God for Yourself podcast? Leaders go first. Come on, Chris.
Oh,
That's
just
it.
would you just put your memory aside? Yes,
Uh,
leaders do go first, and so I thought we could use the podcast just to help unpack a situation that happened. But the first thing, some of our listeners may not be familiar with the Kairos term. So, Andrew,
mhm.
do you want to briefly explain what would you say a Kairos is?
Kairos would be a moment in time where God intersects us. So the difference between chronos is chronological time, you know, the watch time, whereas kairos is that whole idea of God intersecting our world at a particular moment. And so, you know, with a particular event or a particular thing that takes place. And so, you know, Jesus said, the time has come. He wasn't talking about, you know, chronos time. He was talking about a kairos moment in time, if you like. So, yeah, if you think about, you know, life going along in a straight line, it's like drawing an X on the line. And here's a time when God is intersecting our world. That's what it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we see it all the time in the Gospels with the disciples, don't we? Where they're walking along the road and there's a tree that Jesus curses, or they forget their lunch and they turn up with 5,000 people and Jesus does the loaves and the fish thing, and
Yeah,
they learn from it. So it's that point in time where we have the opportunity to pause and reflect and consider how God might be wanting to change us.
yeah.
So yeah, awesome explanation, Andrew. Good job.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, off the bat at 8 o'clock in the morning, it's not too bad. And so often what we do, so maybe the process that then is involved in, you know, recognizing these moments and trying to process these moments is what we would call taking someone around the circle, you know, and
Ah,
trying to
yep.
observe what's going on, reflect, get someone to do some reflection on that, discuss, and then plan, and then I think it's act and account. You know, what are you going to do, and then hold each other accountable for that. So yeah, so I
Yeah.
think that's the way. If my memory's serving me correctly,
Yeah,
at eight
very
o'clock, is that
good.
right? Okay, good.
Yeah, yeah,
So yep.
you've
So
got that
observe,
right.
reflect, discuss, and then plan, act, account. And so yeah, take you
All
around the
right.
circle. Happy to do that. Let's go.
Perfect. So, my observation, so a brief description of what happened. It was a Sunday, not that the Sunday's anything special, but on this particular day, I'd organised to catch up with a friend. Now, this friend and I had lost contact for probably, I don't know, 30 years. I knew her when I was a lot younger. We'd gone to school together. I'd moved, she'd moved. We just lost contact. But we were Facebook friends, as often people are
Yeah.
from your younger years. And we've reconnected probably 4 years ago and just regularly caught up. And on this particular Sunday, I was going over to see her. We were having a conversation and we were talking about God in the conversation, which wasn't part of our normal conversation when we would see each other. And part of what we were talking about, she suddenly said, "Do you remember 7 years ago, about 7 years ago, you sent me a message on Messenger? Pull it up." And so I pulled up this message, and it was a message where I'd had a dream about her the night before. And then, so I messaged her saying, "I dreamt about you, hope you're okay." And then I said, "I'm learning that when God brings people to mind, often He's wanting me to push into that. So I was praying for you, and this is what I felt God was saying about how He loves you." And as I'm reading out this message to her, where I'm sitting with her, Andrew, it was like God was speaking into that afternoon.
Wow.
Everything that we had been talking about was in this message that I had
Right.
sent her 7 years beforehand. I'd forgotten about it. She hadn't. And here we were 7 years later, reading out this message that God spoke into that situation so powerfully.
Wow.
On the same day, I get an email from a pastor, and a couple of years ago, leading up to Christmas, churches that had engaged with accessible prophecy over the year, I just sent Christmas greetings and had listened for a word for them. So I
Yeah.
sent an email to this particular pastor saying, Merry Christmas, blessings. This is what I feel like God is saying for you. Anyway, he emailed me on the same day a couple of weeks ago saying, "Hey, Chris, was searching for something, came across this message from 2 years ago. Just want to let you know this is exactly what I needed to hear and read today. God spoke into my current situation today from what you sent 2 years ago."
Wow.
So, two
That's a
situations on the same day.
that's amazing. That were pulled from past.
Correct. One was
Wow.
about 2 years beforehand, and
Yeah.
the other one was 7 years ago.
Wow. That's
Just,
amazing.
yeah. So, discuss.
Yeah. Okay.
I know,
So
reflect. It's that we observe,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
observe, this is unusual. This is like, wow. So I've
Yeah.
observed something's happened,
Yeah.
reflecting. So ask me some
Reflect.
questions to help me reflect on it.
Okay, so what was going on in you as you started to think about those two words that were given years before? What was going on in you as in your role as that, deliverer of a prophetic word? What was going on in you?
Yeah, good question. There were a couple of things that were going on. One was just gratitude that God was speaking so powerfully into the situation. So that was probably the absolute joy. So I feel, so here's my observation around that. I feel incredible joy when God touches someone deep, speaks deeply into someone's life.
Yeah,
Um,
that's good.
and so probably the first observation was, oh my goodness, how amazing is God?
Yeah,
My second observation pretty quickly alongside that was remembering at the time that isn't this interesting? Both people, when I sent those messages 7 years and 2 years ago, did
yeah.
not respond to them at the time.
Oh wow. No feedback. No,
No feedback
no
at the
thanks
time.
to the email. No, which
Nothing.
is which is fine.
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah, that's
happens.
fine. That's fine.
Yeah,
There's no issue with that. And
yeah,
so, what it actually made me realize is at the time wondering if I'd got it wrong,
yeah,
or had offended, or, particularly with my friend, I think I worried that I'd offended her,
yeah.
uh, and then processed, oh, well. So I had this sort of, at the time, I remember thinking, oh, well, obviously I got it wrong. Okay, God, let's just move on.
Yeah, yeah.
So a bit of a concern at the time. Did I get it wrong? Realizing a couple of weeks ago, actually, God did speak and it was the timing of it. And there was this something there about my need for immediate feedback and reassurance or encouragement or affirmation that I was on the right track.
Yeah. So that's a really interesting point to dig into. Okay. Um, because I think that's normal with people who, excuse me, frog in the throat at 8 o'clock. And so maybe it's a natural thing that comes through from someone who has that prophetic gift to want some immediate feedback. But is that always the way God works? Is that the way that we understand that God works?
Well, no, I don't think. Um, what would I say about that? There's absolutely, I recognize for me, I like receiving feedback, but I feel like out of this kairos, God is really challenging me on my whether I'm dependent on the feedback,
Oh, wow. Okay.
um, rather than am I receiving feedback to improve how I communicate what I feel like God is saying, or
Yeah.
am I wanting feedback to reassure insecurity within myself
Yeah. Yeah.
about whether I can hear God properly, whether I do hear God, whether God is working in and through me?
Yeah. Wow. That's really powerful. And, and thank you for being vulnerable on a podcast. Where who knows where this is going to go, but maybe this is for someone. So as you then started to process that, what were the things that you started to go, okay, no, it's about this, or actually, no, it's not about me, or you know, all that sort of stuff. What were some of the things that came to mind that helped you process through that, or are you just processing through that now?
I think I'm doing a bit of both, Andrew.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, so I think, so I recognize for me there are particular, uh, I talk about buttons that get pressed. What are
Yeah.
the key things in us that we react to, or that are vulnerabilities? That's a better word, vulnerabilities for us. And I think for me, insecurity, God has been working with me for many years about that and being secure. And
Yeah.
actually, engaging with accessible prophecy has been one of the significant things for me in deepening my understanding around identity and being really secure in that.
Wow.
Um, and recognizing God loves me regardless of whether I am successful or give a good word, or, you know, um, so a couple of weeks ago, recognizing actually I need to reaffirm that hearing God is a discipline as
Yeah.
part of this dynamic of hearing God is the discipline of pressing in and using the gift without it becoming a works issue, without thinking I need to do it to be acceptable to God. God loves me regardless.
Yeah.
But actually stewarding the gift well means that I should have some level of discipline. I have to say I'm probably not great at discipline in some areas, but so pushing into the discipline aspect, and then there's this parallel thing around identity and that God loves me outside of the prophetic gift.
Yeah.
So
How
whether
did
or
you?
not, Go.
How did you get yourself to that point of saying, but this is not about my identity because God loves me regardless? How did you get? Is that just a truth that's in the back of your mind all the time, or did you have to work yourself towards that process?
So there are a few things key things, words, pictures, things that God spoke into my life over the last few years that have really embedded that. One
Yeah.
was a moment where I woke up one day with the song "Isn't She Lovely" going through my head.
Oh wow.
Um, and I lay in bed going, and the thought popped in my head, what if God is singing that over you?
Wow.
And like there was this deep knowing God is singing that over me. And so that song, "Isn't She Lovely," is actually nothing to do with doing achievement. Like I'm a task girl.
Yeah.
You want to get something done, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And so distinguishing and separating out the being from the doing has been really, really important for me. Another one was a picture that someone gave me years ago during a huddle where they said, "Chris, I've got this image of you on a sporting field." I think they they were from the UK. So they said, it's a football pitch. And in my head, oh, I don't play AFL. And they're like, no, it's soccer,
Soccer. The world game.
the world game, the football.
Yeah.
And she said, God's standing on the sidelines, turning to everyone around him saying, "That's my girl. Isn't she amazing?"
Wow.
So and there's been a few other words that have happened over the time, but these words have been purely as a father, as a parent, pouring out his love and delight over me.
Yeah.
And the other element around that, I would say, is I'm being challenged to sit in the discipline of receiving. So
Wow.
being willing to receive that from God and say and accept and step into, this is how God sees me.
Wow.
He sees me outside of function or task or job. He sees me as I would see my children. He sees me as his daughter, as someone who he relates to, who he speaks with all the time, who he engages with. Like that's been the stuff that.
Yeah.
But I think what happens for me, because this element of task focus sits so strongly on the side, is that I get caught into that,
Yeah.
and so there's these, it makes so much sense of New Testament when it talks about the war that goes on. Like it's these competing
Yeah.
dynamics for us about the identity God speaks to us about and the function or the kingdom task that we want to engage with. And it's so easy for us to get caught into the function and task as being the most important thing, or that's what gives us identity. That's what tells us we're accepted or successful, or like those elements of our personality that tell us, oh, you need to do this to be accepted by God. We
Yeah.
don't. We don't need to do anything.
No, exactly.
And so when I have these two events happen on the same day, it just cuts right through that element for me to go, oh, God's just drawing me back into relationship. He's drawing me back into, you know what, you're a blessing to other people through the words that you give, but don't rely on the immediacy of the response to determine whether you're going to continue to do that.
Yeah.
Because I think we can get
Absolutely.
discouraged. We can, there's so many things that happen for us if we don't get that sense. And so the releasing of the word to just go, well, God, I have to trust you in
Yeah.
that. I have to trust you in how that's used and what happens with that. But gee, that can be tricky at times if we feel like it's something really powerful or significant. We just have to trust.
Yeah. And the reality is sometimes we do get it wrong.
Yeah, we
Sometimes we
do.
might be,
Yeah,
sometimes we
we
might be
do.
off the mark, and
Yeah.
but our our responsibility is to trust God and say, okay, well, if I'm opening my hands to you and saying, here I am, utilize me, then you will, it's almost like trusting God to speak through you to this other person, to build up, to edify the church. And sometimes it might be that, yeah, those words are not necessarily for here and now, that might be for some time in the future, but we just have to trust that God's got that. Yeah, yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? And
Yeah.
so what got you to the point? Think back, X amount of years ago. What got you to the point of saying, okay, well, God's got that. It's not about me, or did you wrestle with that for a little bit?
I wrestled with it for a little bit, and then uh, I think it was this whole thing of being obedient or disciplined around when God was getting my attention and trusting.
Yeah.
I think there's something there around shame that
Mm,
I'm just like I'm in my head right now. I'm just going, what was I feeling at the time? Was it this competing emotion of I know the knowledge of saying I have to trust God, I have to release it, I have to let God sit with that. And then
yeah.
there was an element of what if I got it wrong? Um, and are those people going to talk to me again? Like that bit of a shame thing of, I don't know, that just, yeah, will it be okay when I
Yeah.
see them next? And so the
Yeah.
awkwardness, when you send someone a text, they don't respond, and it might have been a bit of a challenging interaction, and you meet them the next time. And
Yeah.
I just had to go, well, oh well.
Yeah.
So it was like the message is saying to myself, oh well, like trust God, trust God, trust God,
Yeah.
until the emotions sort of came alongside it. Um,
Yeah. Wow.
does that
That's
make
amazing.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the difference, obviously, guilt says I did something wrong, but
Yeah.
shame actually pushes down inside of us, telling us we are wrong, and it
Oh,
and it moves into
oh,
that whole thing of fracturing relationship, stops us
yeah,
asking questions. It says I'm not worthy to do X. So if that if that's the deep response there, that becomes hard to come back. Can be hard to come back from, and it's an enemy.
yeah.
It's a tool the enemy uses, I think, very, very often to rob us of the joy of what God's doing, to steal away, the potential that God is putting there, and the potential for a relationship. We know the enemy's plans: rob, steal, kill, destroy, whatever. Those things that the Bible talks about. But and I think sometimes, and particularly in Baptist world, we sort of minimize the effect that the enemy can have on us. But I think, the doubt that he puts in our mind, the beating up that he gives us in terms of, oh, you said that the wrong way, or you're wrong. You didn't get the right C, you didn't get the right answer, therefore, yeah, you he's trying to break our relationship with God all the time. And I think, yeah, I think we have to be aware of that. And good on you for being aware of that and then
Well,
starting to dig around it.
I probably didn't articulate it as well as you just did. The one of the things that has really struck me over the years is a statement Brene Brown made, and she said, "Shame thrives in darkness." And my predominant reaction, probably for 20 years or so, a long time in my
Yeah,
life, has been to just push it down and ignore it. It's like you close the door on it and it just sits in a room and comes out every so often. And so as soon as I heard that, I just went, you know what? It needs to be moved from behind me to in front of me,
wow,
like own it and go, I feel shame, but actually remind myself God loves me, God accepts me,
yeah,
um,
you are
all of
not wrong.
those, you know. And so when those moments come, like a few weeks ago on the same day, it's oh wow, this just deeply embeds in a much more powerful way than just saying, trust God.
Yeah,
It deeply embeds that thing of just be obedient to what you feel like God is saying, communicate it in a gentle, loving, comforting way. So think about how you communicate it and trust God for the timing. and
Good.
release it so that it actually is not mine to carry, and then see what God does in the future.
Yeah.
And so if I think about that first half of the circle, for me, there's so, like, the layers of this lesson is so
Mm.
huge. But where my action, if I head into the acting, what's my plan?
Yeah.
I think my plan is just to continue to listen for people, to have that discipline
Good.
of praying and asking God if God brings people to my mind, continuing to just be obedient in sharing what I feel like God is saying.
Yeah.
So if we head into the second area of the circle, the plan to count,
Yeah.
my accountability is to the podcast.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty broad. Did you hear that, everyone? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hold her accountable.
I'm really happy for people to say, are you still releasing the words and being obedient to what God might be saying
Yeah.
in and through me? Because
Yeah.
it's that's part of the accountability actually of the power of this, the reflection, the
Yeah.
circle, is to recognize and to have people prompt us about that
Yeah.
stuff.
And
Yeah.
I reckon this is interesting because we're at Christmas. I think I mentioned this to you before. We get to this time of Christmas and you see, and I saw it all the time yesterday in my Facebook feed, ads on the telly. Elf on the Shelf.
Uh,
That whole idea of Elf on the Shelf. But actually, we do have to sometimes put words on the shelf for the future, not forget about them, but remember that Jesus is not on the shelf. We never put Jesus on the shelf, and he never puts us on the shelf.
oh, I like
And
that.
yeah, and so I think one of those key things to remember at Christmas time, we might put an elf on the shelf, a bit of fun for the kids, whatever. But at the same time, we never put Jesus on the shelf. He is always front and center. He is the one who is not only the reason for the season, but he's the one who continues to give us words, continues to lead and guide us. And therefore, he never puts us on the shelf. He's always wanting to lead, guide, direct, and help us move forward. And maybe that's just part of that, plan, and accountability to remember a lot of it's, in our heads sometimes that, okay, God is still working through me, even though he's put a word on the shelf for someone else and I haven't got the feedback. But that doesn't mean to say he's not working in us, which is
Yeah.
really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've just summarized very articulately probably what I spent 20 minutes talking about, Andrew. So awesome.
Well, hey, it just draws it in and hopefully helps some people. But and I know that some people don't like the whole idea of elves at Christmas time. Just push that aside. If that's something that triggers you or you don't
No,
like it.
send
Remember,
emails to Andrew. Emails to Andrew.
yeah, Andrew at
Any feedback to Andrew.
accessibleprophecy.org.au doesn't exist. It all bounds. But then I think Chris, then for you moving forward, just to go, okay, so for the future, if you don't get the text message back, thanks, or if you don't get anything, what do you do? What are you going to do?
I think I'm actually going to remember the event 2 weeks ago, will pop up into my mind, and it will remind me that I just release it and trust God.
Yeah.
And, I'm always careful around how I frame things and the language that I use to make sure that I'm not offending or, the words I use are accessible.
Yeah.
So just trust that. I think that's where I'll sit is, oh, well, I'll just trust God.
It's good.
I like the phrase, oh, well.
That's right.
Oh, well. It's not in the Bible, but I'm pretty sure Jesus would have gone, oh, well. No.
Yeah. I'm just a conduit. Oh, well. He'll do what he wants with it. That's
the
great.
thing. And I think the other thing for me is just the encouragement to press into the discipline of listening and the discipline of sharing, because life can get overwhelm us with activity. And so just recognizing the discipline of sitting with God and saying, Lord, what are you saying for this person? And trusting and then releasing, regardless of what comes back from what we pray. And so just the encouragement for people to press into that a bit more. And so, Andrew, we've probably got to the end of our podcast. We've nailed it. Mic drop moment.
Mic drop.
But just a reminder for everyone to keep an eye out. We here in Australia, we are looking or going to be doing a global, not a global, a national. That'd be pretty broad. Global. We're going global.
Let's put that on the shelf and see where it goes.
We're doing a national accessible prophecy gathering here in Australia in Melbourne from the beginning of March 1st to the 5th. I think some of the dates are, and keep an eye out. Links in the podcast details. Links will be there to the events. Would love to see as many people as possible come along because we are excited about gathering people together to see what God might be doing in the prophetic space.
It's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a great weekend. Cath
Livesey's coming out. It'll be a great time.
She is. So keep your eye on socials and all those sorts of things for details around that. There's going to be different things for different types of people. So events for pastors, events for leaders, events for prophetic people. Yep. We want to, resource and equip and empower you to be all that God is calling you to be in your particular situation. So we're looking forward to that.
You are articulate at 8:30 in the morning, Andrew Hill. I have to say, it's impressive.
Mornings aren't my sweet spot, but hey, maybe it's just because it's getting close to Christmas and I have some energy. It's good.
Well, Merry Christmas, my friend. Merry Christmas to all our listeners. May this time be a special season of engaging with God in a deeper and richer way. We'll catch you next time.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Prophecy Project. We hope you've been encouraged as you've listened today. We would love to connect with you. You can do that by following Accessible Prophecy on Instagram and Facebook. If you have a question or topic you would like us to cover, please check the podcast information description for ways that you can connect with us and for links to resources, workshops, and coaching. We hope you'll join us for the next Prophecy Project podcast.